So today we have panelists from throughout California and some folks here from Colorado and from Oregon to talk about broken windows policing and bids and what it looks like to fight it and the impacts of it in our communities. JoJo is our first panelist to give, again, a 5 to 7 minute introduction, and then we'll follow up with some follow-up questions.
So yes, I'm JoJo Smith, and I'm with Los Angeles Community Action Network, which we call LACAN. A little background on myself. I was an unhoused resident of Skid Row for 10 years. Originally was a street hustler, done illegal selling stuff, and Occupy happened. I went there to just like get the free stuff and keep my tent up, and seeing what white folks and so-called liberals, how they treat the homeless. And I knew about LACAN because they helped me with some tickets years ago before Occupy happened. And so after Occupy, we formed what we called Occupy Town Street, where we took the community and showed them gave them know your rights training, how to know the rights of the streets. Because we know that these bids, I call them bicycle babies, how they try to tell you what to do, and so we had showed the community how to resist them. And one way we showed the resistance was they would come and tell us that we had to take our tents down. And we would tell them, y'all do not police the sidewalk, we do not have to do that. And so they would call LAPD, and we'd drop our tents when we seen LAPD coming, just to show them that we don't care what they say, because they don't own the sidewalks. So after about a month, 5 or 6 blocks started doing the same thing because of the resistance that we showed them that they could do. And so now, myself, General Dogon, and several other folks that live in the community, we're on 24-hour community watch. And we go out and we're constantly monitoring LAPD. We constantly monitor the bids. Shayla will talk about a little bit more about the legal side, why we have our community watch. For us, we have to document. We have to get documentation showing how these folks are trying to control our streets. We pay taxes. We pay taxes for these streets, and they try to take our streets from us. So we have to keep giving resistance, and we got to keep showing resistance. We got to show other communities what resistance looks like, because they do not control us. They work for the businesses. Their job is to secure the inside of the businesses, not the sidewalks. But they make people think that they have control of the sidewalks, which they do not. So we have to keep telling them, and we have to keep our communities knowing that the sidewalks belong to us.
So I got my start around homeless advocacy with Occupy Denver. There was a physical encampment for about 8 months that lasted specifically because we had such a large homeless population participating in it. And its destruction came about because of the bids, specifically one bid, the Downtown Denver Partnership, which lobbied with pre-written legislation for a camping ordinance, which they've been trying to push for a long time, but they finally had the momentum through Occupy in order to convince enough legislators or enough city council members to pass the ordinance. And they passed it within a month with very little community discussion and very few public meetings, and successfully disseminated the camp and began harassing the homeless on a wide scale throughout the city. And they never made any arrests on it for quite a while because they knew it could be challenged constitutionally. And so they use it as a homeless stop and frisk, and they use it as a mechanism to essentially approach any homeless individual and then subsequently searching for warrants and check their pockets for contraband or whatever. So it was becoming a big problem. Anyways, I ended up leaving after the camping ban was implemented and then coming back and finding Denver Homeless Out Loud had organized its way out of Occupy and formed into its own independent group and was doing a lot of amazing work around the intersectionality of housing justice and several other issues. Unfortunately, the Downtown Denver Partnership continued to grow in strength, and they currently hold a lot of weight and just recently funded, I think, every city council candidate that came into office this year. They all got funded by the developers and by the business alliances. So it's a pretty big problem. They're taking over the city, and ideally, we can do something to stop it.
I got involved in helping the houseless community when I first became houseless. I was a snob. I was an aerospace technician, and I would go to work, and the houseless people would say, "Hey, you got a quarter, so I can get this or that." And I said, "You can ask me for a quarter. You can get up and go look for work." And when I became houseless, I found out that what I was implementing on them was a lie, wasn't true. And so I got caught up in that system, and you stay in that vicious cycle of street, shelter, and jail. And that's what Benjamin talked about intersectionality, how we have mass incarceration, and the new shelters are becoming the prisons and the jail. So I figured that what helped me to get successful, the first thing a house person look for is rest, a nice, safe place to sleep where they won't be disturbed, and criminalize the exercise of human rights. So we started forming encampment sites with 10 of us in the tents, and they say it's a camping ban. I said, "What, people can't go camping?" That's how naive I was, and I think the general public is naive to the situation until they become involved or infected by non-affordable housing. So we start looking at the coding, the zoning, and the laws, and start breaking them, not breaking them, but flatten until they, fragile and not break them. So we said, okay, it's a camping ban, but is it a village ban? So we start calling our tent city villages or rest area, and they don't have those laws against having a village or a rest area. And so after we became successful with many protests and demonstrations and direct action, we started educating the houseless community on their constitutional, human, and civil rights on how to fight back, because you cannot, I don't care how you try hard, you cannot outdo God and stop people from falling asleep. That's a human right. You cannot stop people from using the restroom. That's a human right. And each time a house person do that, they're being criminalized. So we have to educate our people, our community, our brothers and sisters on their rights. And that's when we go to different cities and states throughout this country, consulting them on building rest areas, villages, and tent cities. And with this, bringing this in, that's why we in a campaign with the Right to Rest Act bill. That's unconstitutional by the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights in Article 25 that everybody deserves a right to rest, a right to sleep. But this government is trying to bring with the bids, they trying to say they have a God complex and saying you can't sleep because you don't live in the house. You can't use the restroom because you don't live in the house. That's so absurd and ridiculous, and as Mike Tyson said, it's ludicrous. So we got to come together and fight this form of discrimination, oppression, and repression, to let them know that we're going to exercise our human right. It's constitutional.
And I've been at the Legal Aid Foundation for about the last year and a half, and during my time, most of my time has actually been taken up suing a business improvement district, which is a little bit of a dream come true. And that is in large part because of the work that the Community Action Network, LA Can, Community Watch, and everyone who was on the ground did in documenting the abusive practices of the business improvement district in Skid Row. So Skid Row is overlapped with a really powerful business improvement district, the Los Angeles Downtown Industrial District. And so because of the work of folks collecting documentation, the Legal Aid Foundation was able to partner with and represent LA Can in this lawsuit. And this lawsuit is really unique for one, I think, really important reason, is that we made the strategic decision, our clients made the strategic decision to sue the Downtown Industrial District, not as private actors, but rather as government actors for violating the constitutional rights of the citizens of Skid Row. And for us, that's a really, really important distinction, because I think we've largely thought of business improvement districts as private actors who don't have any authority under state law, who are sort of out there operating on their own. But unfortunately, the tragic reality is that they are operating with the permission, with the responsibility, and with the authority that's given to them by the City of Los Angeles under state law. They're operating with a different level of authenticity, and unfortunately without the accountability of a state actor. And under the constitutional principles, the Constitution protects all of us, not against private people, but against the government. It protects us against the government's infringing on our constitutional rights. So by bringing this lawsuit against them as a government actor, we were able to say that the business improvement district was violating the Fourth Amendment right to be free of unreasonable searches and seizures, the right to be free of having your property taken without due process, and to be able to stand up and say that business improvement districts can't, on the one hand, get the benefit of the government collecting taxes, requiring property owners like LA Can, like the Los Angeles Catholic Worker, to pay into the processes, to pay into their actions, and at the same time be able to say, we're just private, we don't have any authority, we're just operating like private citizens. So that's what we're doing at the Legal Aid Foundation, and I think it's a really exciting opportunity. It's a way in which LA Can and other folks are really fighting back and using some of the BID's own rhetoric to really fight back in court to say that what's going on is not okay.
So, I don't want to actually kind of draw the parallel, because I was introduced under the Black Lives Matter grouping, even though I'm going to speak a lot about race, I don't want to just be like, oh, he's from Black Lives Matter, of course he's going to speak about race. You see, the reality about it is that if race is actually not spoken about within the system, then there are major faults and fallacies into solving the problems that we're dealing with. When we speak about what's actually happening with the city and how bids work and how the city restructures itself and how that can be pulled back to capitalist structures of how it creates classes and underclasses, we also have to look at the intersectionality of race. It's very important right here, especially being in the city of San Francisco. And I'm sure some of you know where I'm going to go with this. See, San Francisco used to be known as the most chocolate city west of the Mississippi. It was the blackest city west of the Mississippi. It used to be that way. I think we're now down to 4%. But what's interesting, one day I was actually looking through the minutes of the city council meeting. And as you know, black people used to be, oh my God, it's where the jazz festival is. Why am I picking the Fillmore? There we go. Sorry about that. My apologies. My apologies on that. Yeah. I have an excuse, so I wasn't alive at that time. So. The Fillmore, though, right? So it's interesting that the Fillmore actually has gone through several street widening processes in which it was intended to disrupt the black economy that was there. And this isn't the first time, nor the last time this was actually done. It was done in LA, it was done in Oakland, it was done in San Jose, it was done in Sacramento, it was done in many places in California, in addition to many places across the nation. So it's a very close familiarity, especially with black people, dealing with the city actually attacking the community and disrupting, you know, and disrupting the economy. I see this one cat right here, for example, wearing the shirt when, that was when the organization was bombed, correct, with the helicopter? MOVE. Yeah, the MOVE organization, that's right. There's also, for example, Black Wall Street, which was destroyed, and so on and so forth. I don't want to go too far in depth with that. But the main point I want to address, though, is that if you're not actually examining race with the removal and the dispersal of black people, then we're not actually addressing the real solutions to things. I'm going to stop right there for a second and bring up another point around police and how policing and institutions of the police and mass incarceration actually work. And then I'm going to tie this into the very last thing, which was a report that was put out by the Ella Baker Center. It was last month that this came out. It was called Who Pays for the Cost of Incarceration? It's a very, very, very important thing, and I urge you to check out this report. It's Who Pays for the Cost of Incarceration. And what they did was they actually went and surveyed people who were incarcerated, people who were informally incarcerated, and the people, the families who were involved with those who were incarcerated. With the issues around policing, I'm going to do a real quick exercise with people. What I want y'all to do is just to try to relax, if you're not already relaxed, I'm sure you are. And close your eyes. You don't have to, but it'll be nice if you did, because I want you to really use your imagination right here. And I want you to think. Dig in deep and think of what it means to be safe, of what that smells like, of what food may be around, what that tastes like, what it sounds like. What are you in or what are you not in? Who are you around? Is there family around you? What is around you? What are the sounds that you hear? Go ahead and open your eyes, and I want to ask you a quick question. Did any of you think of the police?
Yeah. First thing came to my mind. Always harassing someone and somebody.
So the thing about that is, I'm sure nobody, like I said, I'm very, very certain, nobody thought of like, I have, you know, Officer McKinney right next to me, keeping me safe at night. Nobody probably thought about that. I don't think so.
No, they don't keep you safe at night.
Oh, no, they don't. No, they don't. That's right. People probably thought about a nice food. For me, it's macaroni and cheese. I love macaroni and cheese.
Okay.
People probably thought about family, a grandmother, a mother, a father, a sibling, something like that. That keeps them safe. You see, the reality about it is that community keeps us safe. Strong community keeps us safe. The institution of the police are not around to keep us safe, nor do they function as a safety mechanism for the community. It's false, it's fake, there's no evidence to prove that. What we do know, and I know I'm speaking to the choir here, is that the police function as a mechanism in society when you have a split between those who have and those who have not. They've always functioned this way. When you begin to couple this with mass incarceration, with the 2.4 million people inside, not even including those under monitoring right now. When you couple this with mass incarceration, and you then couple this also with a broken criminal, not a broken, it works actually very fine, with the criminal justice system that is intent on feeding these two entities, then you begin to understand the creation of these underclasses that are created. Both people without homes, people who are impoverished, and as Michelle Alexander states in the new Jim Crow, a prison class of people who are perpetually in prison. I was very dumbstruck with this, and I'll end with this right here because I know my 5 minutes is up. I was really dumbstruck with this right here. I was at a city council meeting and I was listening to the chief of police in Oakland, as they are under federal investigation. But I was listening to the chief of police in Oakland, and he says this right here. This is what he says. This is what he says. To everybody in the audience, there's maybe 100 people there. And he goes, so we've discovered it's a problem when we start arresting people who are under the age of 16.
Oh my God.
Hold on. So he goes, statistically speaking, when we arrest people under the age of 16, there's an 80% chance we will re-arrest these people by the time they're 18. Then he goes on to say, the reason why these statistics are so high is because if we've already arrested the breadwinner in the family, there is a 90% chance that that next person who would get arrested is that person, is that child. So he says, these are our problems right there. Then he goes on to say the most profound thing ever. He says, so then we've noticed throughout all of our policing in Oakland that when we disrupt the family unit by taking out the breadwinner and the next in line breadwinner, that we begin to chip away at the community. As if this was something that was very profound right there. We begin to destroy the community. Why? Because we create a cycle of incarceration in the family. We've broken the family, we've broken the community. And I'm looking at him as if this is the true definition of what's called cognitive dissonance. My thought process was, do you know the line of work that you're in?
Okay.
To point to that article, or the study that was done, the study that was done by the Ella Baker Center. Families outdo faith-based organizations, government agencies for coming back into society, and nonprofit organizations combined. If you combine all those things, families actually outdo those entities in providing jobs for people who have, for their own loved ones who have come out of incarceration and who are in incarceration. They provide more resources in terms of jobs, housing, and food, and shelter than all those organizations combined. Why is it that the prison industrial complex puts such a weight on these families? All this does is that it breaks families. There are numerous stories without this that are scattered around that study, which shows how families will actually give up their homes just to travel to go see the loved one in prison. Just traveling and communication. If you all know what it is actually call somebody in jail, you understand what I'm talking about with this. They lose their housing, they lose their cars, they lose their jobs, they lose so much. And the sad thing about this is this right here. The vast majority of that, when I say vast majority, I'm talking about 80% and up, are actually bared by women. 1 in every 4 women have a loved one in jail. But in the black community, it's 1 in every 2 have a loved one in jail. And so the normal case for this is that it's usually a grandmother, a mother, or a spouse that is actually holding you down while you're inside and when you come out. And that breaks the community. And then creates a positive feedback loop to put people back into prison. And I can go into that a little bit later, but I wanted to stop right there. Let you all sit with that.
Hi, I'm Liz Brown. I come from an academic perspective, so probably much more boring than anybody else up here, so I apologize for that in advance. I do love that you brought up the police, because that's what I also would like to talk a little bit about. Many of you probably know this, but of course broken windows is not new tactics of police. It's kind of the historical tactic, or the historical role that police have played in communities, playing the role between, as, I'm sorry, Suleiman said, playing the role, you know, the arbiter between the haves and the have-nots. So I really just wanted to bring up a couple of points about how surprised I was about George Kelling's stance that he thought that, you know, it's not it's the application that's been wrong, it's not actually broken windows policing. If anybody's actually read that article, it's very clear that he is actually lamenting a time when police could play the role of, as he puts it, kicking ass without the oversight of the court. So he's actually lamenting a couple of changes that went on in the 60s and 70s that brought things like the Fourth Amendment right to local citizens and the relationship between the police and local citizens. So I find that really surprising to me, especially when he, at the very beginning of the article, Wilson and Kelling both point out that, in fact, broken windows is not meant to solve crime. It's actually just meant to decrease people's fear of people that they find disorderly. So people that he identifies very explicitly as people who are not violent, people who are not criminals, but people who are loiterers, people who are gang members, people who are homeless. So it seems very clear to me that the logic of broken windows is not meant to decrease crime, it's not meant to make us safer, but is actually meant to exclude people that are dispossessed by a capitalist society, by a racist society, by a white supremacist society. So I found that very shocking. I also found it very shocking that it's actually been used in any way to say that it should decrease crime when almost every single study that has been done of police, and this is actually cited in the Wilson and Kelling article, shows that in fact increasing police has no effect on crime. There's an excellent study of Kansas City that shows that when they divided up Kansas City into 3 different districts, they increased police in one, they decreased police in another, and they kept police the same. And none of those strategies had any effect on crime rates. So the turn towards police, the turn towards broken windows as a crime control measure is a fallacy in itself. And I think if you read Broken Windows, it is doing exactly what it was intended to do, which is to harass the poor, which is to harass communities of color, and which is to create the cycle of incarceration that we see so present in American society.